the information on slide 3, and where you have the, where this information came from, were there certain cities this samples came from, or was this a Minnesota, or where was this information gathered from?
On the climate change slide? Okay.
Number 3, yes.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you.
So this is a statewide look at our greenhouse gas emissions.
I think maybe the question was what agency did it, or how did we?
No, Mr. Chair, my question is what, it's great to say it was statewide. Did they drive around with a truck to collect this information? Did they have certain cities? Are there sampling stations in certain places within the state? Where did this data come from? And where can I go look at the sampling data to say that this data is true? Is it one of those modeling programs that information goes in and the quality of the information goes in determines the quality information goes out? I just want to know, where did we collect this data? Was it Minneapolis, St. Paul? Was it Bemidji, Minnesota? Exactly where did these come from?
Commissioner.
Mr. Chair and Senator Howe, so the MPCA samples are from all around the state, and we have samples of that systems. And Frank Kolesh is our director who oversees our air sampling and air program, and he can talk more about how the samples that we took as well as the modeling.
Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Frank Kolesh. I'm Climate Director for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And to answer your question, Senator Howe, the way that we come up with that emissions estimate for the state of Minnesota is based on collecting data from the Department of Public Safety on the entire population of the vehicle fleet in Minnesota. And we make sure we go through that very carefully to make sure that we're getting a good representation of the vehicles that are registered for use on the roads in Minnesota. Then we use an EPA model that allows us to look at understanding what the vehicle miles traveled that are being reported by Department of Transportation, by Metropolitan Council. We put that into the model, and it provides us with a statewide estimate of the greenhouse gas emissions from the entire transportation sector. And in this case, to your question, the greenhouse gas emissions coming from motor vehicles, the burning of gasoline and diesel on Minnesota's roads. And within the modeling platform that provides a projection, that was used, a contract was secured by the Department of Transportation to look at that. It's the same modeling and building off of modeling that Xcel Energy had used last year as they looked at their integrated resource plan, and they were looking to see what the potential impacts of future growth of electric vehicle use would have on their systems. So we leveraged their work and then added in additional information and work with a contractor to do this modeling that looked at all of the sources of emissions and greenhouse gases and what it would take to achieve an 80% reduction by 2050.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to see. Mr. Chair, I'd love to see that report. If you could provide that data or a link to that, I would love to take a look at that. Yes. If I may, sure. Mr. Chair. So, where did you? As long as we're talking about data points and information.
He's your guy.
So how do we, Commissioner, when we look at the next slide, slide 7? I'm guessing that is also where we're, or I shouldn't say slide 7. Maybe I should put my glasses on. Slide 4. The next slide. Okay. When we start talking about deaths from air pollution, did we take this from death certificates? Where did we, or is this another deal where we start to put in the data and we have a program that spits out this is what is causing all the deaths in Minnesota?
Commissioner.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, Mr. Chair and Senator Howe, that report, the Life and Breath report, is available on the Pollution Control Agency and the Department of Health's website. And how we did that data was we took our air monitoring data for fine particles and ozone for the state. And we also looked at data that EPA provides, which then gives more coverage throughout the state to ensure that we had a good understanding of the levels of these air pollutants throughout the state. Then we worked with the Department of Health, and using health data from actual Minnesotans, we came up with the mechanism to calculate how many deaths would be attributable if you were exposed to those pollutants at the levels that we both measure and that also EPA provided us with some additional data for. So Department of Health, we worked closely with them on the calculation method on how to make those attributions, and it's very closely tied to the underlying health of Minnesotans and then their exposure to the air pollution. But that report's also available on both of our websites and can provide more detailed information about how those calculations were made if you would like.
Yes.
So if I could follow up on that, so you don't have any actual death information, you're just making an assumption with the air quality that X amount of people in Minnesota are going to die because of the emissions.
Mr. Chair, correct. The death certificates are not going to represent anything related to air pollution, but we do know that the kinds of respiratory or cardiovascular causes of death that can be reported on death certificates that goes into MDH's collection of data does then give us the population that we're looking at, and we can then use the calculations and epidemiology to understand how many would be attributable to exposure to air pollutants at that level.